When are you going to file for divorce? In case you've forgotten, I'm expecting a baby, and I wouldn't want it to be born in a single-parent family. That day Miranda was especially angry, and David, listening to another stream of complaints, only kept silent because he did not know what to say to her. We've been talking about this for months now, and every time I hear another excuse from you, to put it mildly, I'm sick of it. I want a clear answer to my question or we're splitting up. I'm having a baby, I'm proving your paternity in court. And you're holding me and the baby. I'm sick of waiting. I'm fucking tired of everything that's going on in our lives. Miranda was absolutely right. It was his fault that things were going the way they were. He was the one who couldn't figure out how to move on. And it really had been going on for months. It's just an office romance, Kelly told her daughter. You've got more of him than you can count. Why are you so hung up on him? Your boss seduced your young fool of a boss, and now you're making a profit out of it? Don't get too carried away with him, especially if he's married. Why do you have to go to all this trouble? Men are like that. They can sit on two chairs with one hand. And you, stupid, you're hanging your ears. He's not going anywhere with Cindy. It's not just family, it's business. Or do you think he'll want to start all over again in his old age? He's not stupid. He doesn't want it all for nothing. He'll sleep with you. But he won't expect much more than that. And I wouldn't advise it either. If word gets out to his Cindy, you'll be a mess. He'll find something to fire you for. And if there's something bad on your labor record, you won't be able to find a job. You got to use your head. Olenka, with your head. Your life is just beginning, and he's already lived his. He's 40 years old now, and in 10 years he'll be 50. And that's retirement. He will be too lazy to get up from the couch, not that any problems to solve, and you will spend your youth on it all, and then you will regret that you were such a fool. Miranda worked as a secretary in a construction firm. She couldn't find another job, and it took her several months to find it. A young, inexperienced girl with a dubious education, they wouldn't take her anywhere. Who needs your cultural education? She heard in response at the next interview with your diploma. You should go to the Capitol. There's plenty of work there for creative types like you. She wanted to become an actress, and for the sake of her dream was ready to overcome any obstacles. Miranda did not listen to her mother's advice, and when the time came to decide on the choice of profession, she applied to the local College of Culture. Where are you going? Kelly was indignant. Even after the 9th grade from the school slipped away. Well, then you study for 3 years. And then where to go? We don't have the money to move to the Capitol, don't even think about it. And here with this diploma nobody needs you, you'll only waste your time. But she didn't want to hear anything. After graduating from college, she applied to the Moscow Theater Institute and went to take the entrance exams. But at the audition Miranda failed miserably, and she had no choice but to return to her hometown. That's what I've been telling you, Kelly told her daughter. Or you thought that you are waiting for you there and there are enough cultural figures and actresses, and without you, Moscow lived perfectly well and will continue to live. But you should go to school and get a normal education, to get a job somewhere. I won't be able to support you until you're 30. We don't have much to live on. You see, your father never gave me a penny in his whole life. I do it all myself. And I'm not old yet either, and I want to have a little rest and live for myself. Miranda Kelly separated from her father in her early youth. They were never even married. As soon as the young promising student heard that she was expecting a child, immediately began to dissuade her to give birth. But where are we going to have kids with you now? Said Kevin. What are we going to feed them on? Think about it. We have no place to live, no money, nothing. And if we have a child so early, we'll have no prospects at all. I've been offered an internship in Moscow. I can't refuse. If in 6 months I will be sent there, there will be a chance to finish the institute to get a grip on the Capitol. That's something. And then I'll be waiting for many years of laborious work. You know, it's very difficult to achieve something in the Capitol from scratch. There, people like me, in 10 or 15 years, you can think about children. But she didn't want to wait. Getting rid of a child for the whims of her lover. Kelly wasn't going to. And when she saw his true colors, she told him she was breaking up with him. And don't even come near me at the institute, she said. Otherwise, on yourself. I can manage without you. Mom will help me and you. I don't want to know you anymore. It was very hard for her to get over what had happened. Before all this, Kelly was sure that Kevin loved her and that they would have a real family. But she was sorely mistaken. All the worries about her daughter fell on her shoulders. Her studies at the institute had to be interrupted. They lived poorly. The girl had a daughter before education. "You have to work," said Lisa Kelly. "When Miranda was 3 years old, get a job as an assistant in the accounting department, for example. You get all the experience, you can expect more. It's not like you have to get your daughter up to speed before she graduates." 6 months after that conversation, Kelly put Juliana in kindergarten and struggled to find a job in the economics department. Kevin was long gone when she called him to tell him about the birth of her daughter. His mother answered the phone. "Don't call here again," said the woman. "You have nothing to talk to my son about. He's been out of town for months. He's got his own life and career. What's wrong with him? He's not going to be pulling any kids right now. He told you straight up. You had a choice. You didn't want to. But now it's your problem to deal with." After that conversation, Kelly was interrupted for days. Lisa tried her best to bring her to her senses, but she didn't want to discuss her relationship with Kevin with anyone. It pained her to realize that everyone around her was right, and she had done a stupid thing for which not only herself would pay for the rest of her life, but her daughter now had a fate. You wouldn't wish it on an enemy. So how is she going to grow up now? Fatherless? Kelly wailed. At the time, she saw the whole thing as a huge tragedy. She was scared that she wouldn't be able to get her daughter back on her feet, afraid to wait until she was old enough to ask where her father was. She won't be able to find the right words to answer why I gave birth to her in the first place. Maybe Kevin was right. I'd rather not live like this than nothing at all. Don't you dare say that. Lisa said it harshly. You're out of your mind. Half the country is fatherless. What now? We have to get rid of all the children. Did you know from the beginning that he refused to recognize the child? When he didn't even know if you were having a son or a daughter. He didn't even know if you could carry at all. And things happen. You gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Be happy. And don't give me that bullshit. We'll grow up. We'll be better than all of us, and we've handled more than that. But Miranda didn't live up to her mother's or grandmother's expectations. The problems began in adolescence, when instead of sitting over her textbooks, as her mother expected her to do, Miranda preferred to spend her time watching soap operas. Movies were her main hobby. She didn't care about school at all. What are you going to grow up to be? Kelly resented her, once again unplugging the TV cable. What do you aspire to? You're getting straight A's. You can't get into anything with that kind of knowledge. What are you going to do for a living? How do you plan to support yourself? You can't get by on creativity, and your grandmother and I aren't going to feed you for the rest of your life. At a certain point, Kelly realized that Miranda was a burden. She had to drop out of college and take a job. A banal, boring job. She's also the reason she's never been able to make a life for herself. You have to raise a child, Lisa said. And remember, there will be no men in our house. And that's enough. You've already had yours at the institute? Here it is. The result, as they say, is obvious. You should spend time with your daughter, not looking for new acquaintances. She'll look at you and she'll be the same way. Lisa reacted violently to any attempt by Kelly to start building a life for herself. Whenever her daughter was late at work, she was sternly reprimanded, and as soon as the weekend approached, swamped her with household chores so that there was no time left at all. When Laika was born, I helped you in everything, reprimanded his daughter Lisa when she came home too late. But she's not a little girl anymore. You need to put as much as you can into her now, so that she can achieve something, not just a Mauser. But neither her mother nor her grandmother managed to influence Miranda. No matter how hard they tried to put her in a strict framework, they could not make her finish school and enter the institute. Mom. But who needs her now? This higher education, Miranda said with sincere incomprehension when she finished the 8th grade. So she went to the institute. I spent a lot of time and effort to get there. And what do you think? If you hadn't had me and you had gotten your crust, would you be living a better life now? No, I wouldn't. It's an illusion that a diploma is a guarantee of any prospects in life. I'm not a little girl and I'm still young. It's better to follow your dreams than to spend your life in some boring office, poring over papers without ever trying. When Miranda failed her audition for the Theater Institute, she didn't want to go home. She knew she'd hear her mother and grandmother's reproaches and their favorite phrase, "We told you so." She had no chance to stay in the capital unless she spent the night at the train station. But she would never dare to do that. So a few days after the results of the entrance examinations were known, she came home. "So did you try it?" Kelly asked her the next day. "And now it's time for the secretarial graduates to get smart. I have already found the best in the city, excellent teaching staff, and all sorts of firms we have a pond. I'm sure they'll take me somewhere soon. Forget about your snotty dreams once and for all." At that moment, Miranda was so desperate that she didn't care what would happen to her. She did as her mother said, called the Learning Center, signed up for the course, and attended as scheduled without missing a single class. Kelly and Lisa never ceased to be amazed at Miranda's obedience. They even praised her when she brought home a certificate with excellent marks for taking the course. But Lisa said it all that day. "Now you can put together a resume and look for a job. You'll be bringing home a paycheck in a few months, and then you'll be able to save up for something." Kelly was happy for Miranda too. She was sure that she had secured her future and helped her to make the first step towards a stable career. But it didn't turn out to be that easy. It took Miranda several months to find a job. No one wanted to hire a young girl with a degree from a cultural college and a certificate from a secretarial course. There was no work experience, and the creative streak, which behind the hotel company employees felt in their gut, did not inspire confidence. "You can see you don't want to work," a woman with a stern face once told Miranda at a job interview. "As soon as you have an opportunity to realize yourself in something else, you will immediately quit." And we have people who work for years. Some of our accountants came straight out of college and have been in the same place for 20 years. That was the worst thing for her. Looking at all these women with gray, tired faces, she realized that the same future awaited her, and that made her uncomfortable. But there was no choice either, and Miranda was quite aware of that. After a few months, she managed to get a job at a local construction company. "My name is David," said a stately man with a stern face and deep blue eyes at the interview. "No middle name. All of us here are not used to feeling old, and even with young employees, we prefer to communicate on equal terms. I'm ready to hire you. I'll give you 3 days to finish all your work. We'll call you beforehand to agree on what time you'll arrive and sign the employment contract." After the interview, he offered her a cup of tea, but she declined and left the office after politely saying goodbye. When she arrived home, she informed her mother and grandmother that she had found a job. They rejoiced. But Miranda herself could think of nothing and no one but him. He was so tightly lodged in her mind that she was not happy to meet them. On the last day before signing the contract, she'd seriously considered calling and backing out, but then she'd imagined having to go on interviews again if she didn't find anything, listening to rebukes from her grandmother's mother. She was definitely not ready for that, so she went to work the next day and signed the employment contract. From that moment on, her new life began, which crossed out everything that had once been important to her. If she had known what was ahead of her, she would never have taken this job in her life. "Give me more. I can't give you more anyway. At least not yet," David said, stretching the buttons on his shirt. "Sit here for now. Just be quiet. Keep your head down. The office has been empty for a long time, but I don't know if anyone will drop by. I'm not the only one with keys. I'll be right there." He left the office and Miranda was left alone. She couldn't believe what had happened. She thought it was some kind of strange dream. And then a moment later she wakes up and finds out that none of it happened. It was just a dream. That day she stayed late at work, frantically trying to figure out all the nuances of filling out reports. It had been 2 weeks since she had been hired. She still couldn't get her head around the intricacies of the paperwork. But who fills out contracts like that? Clara grinned. "David will never be able to understand anything. Look, I'll show you, and then you'll do the same." Sligo was the only person in the company who took her colleague to heart. The rest of the employees looked at her obliquely and did not even consider it necessary to say hello to the new secretary. "Don't mind her," Clara reassured her. "They react so strongly to all newcomers. They have a sort of long-established team here. You work, you laugh. They'll get used to you and change their attitude." But Miranda had little interest in the attitudes of her co-workers. The only person who attracted her attention was David. And it was so noticeable that one day Clara hinted to her that she shouldn't look so closely into her boss's eyes. "Miranda, you are still very young and completely inexperienced," said Slaga. "But let me give you one piece of advice. Not examining your son, or him, will not do you any good. David has been married long and tightly. It is unlikely that he would break such a strong bond for the sake of a young girl who is there today and gone tomorrow." Miranda only nodded at her then and did not enter into dialogue. She didn't want to share her feelings with anyone and thought to herself that Clara had just said that out of jealousy. She was a fairly young and attractive woman herself. Miranda thought that she was just jealous that he too had never once passed by without looking in her direction. Miranda found out much later, when everything started, that by strong and reliable ties she meant not love at all. She didn't go into details. She just wanted to be near him. She had never been in love with anyone. She'd never fallen in love so hard. It blurred in her mind to the point of shaking in her knees. When she walked into his office and brought a whole folder of reports, he got up from his chair and looked out the door and closed it. "The day was dragging on," he said languidly. "You must be very tired." "It's late. It's late. Let's save the reports for tomorrow. I'll take a look at everything and tell you what edits need to be made and where. Now let's just rest, relax, sit and talk. You've only just joined us, haven't you? I don't know you at all." From a small cabinet near the table, he took out a bottle of cognac and dark chocolate, and pouring the flavorful drink into a glass, he handed Miranda a glass. "Well, shall we drink to the acquaintance?" he said. He smirked. She had never drank alcohol until now, so one glass was enough to make her lose control. After a few minutes, he was already pulling her against him and planting his hands all over her body. "I saw that you wanted it," David urged. "I really want this too." Miranda did not resist and actively responded to his solicitation. She really wanted it, but because she was too dizzy at that moment and the earth was literally falling away from under her feet, she could not believe that it was really happening to her. "Here you go." David came back from the pharmacy and handed her a pill packet. "Take it here and now, in front of me, so I can be sure you haven't forgotten. And then I'll call you a cab and you can go home. We won't meet here again. It's no use. There's a lot of people in the office and it can't be safe even in the evenings. I called a doctor I know the other day. You go see her for a consult. She'll prescribe the right medication to be sure. I don't want any trouble." "I don't think you do either." As she listened to him, she found it very difficult to take in what he was saying. It was only after he placed a glass of water on the small table in front of her that Miranda slowly began to come to her senses. "What is it?" she asked. She had been dating a young man up to this point, but never once had he forced her to take any pills. Robert had always taken care of her, so he had solved all such issues on his own. Sometimes she even regretted that they had broken up and was nostalgic about their relationship. He was so touching and romantic, courteous, and at some points even withdrawn and shy. Miranda didn't know whether she loved him or not, but she had always realized that if she married a simple guy from a remote province, she would stay in this town forever. She would have to forget about her career and popularity, which she dreamed about even after failed auditions. Robert wasn't right for her, and she was 100% sure of that. He was the most ordinary college graduate who, having received not the most decent education, worked as a sales consultant in one of the central stores. He didn't aspire to much more. His salary was enough to pay his expenses and not take money from his parents. And he didn't think about everything else. In his free time he read books, went to the movies and led a very ordinary life. After a while Miranda became bored with him, and she stopped communicating with him without any explanation. David was not like that at all. Miranda had a chance to organize her life the way she wanted, and it was foolish and unforgivable not to take advantage of it. "Yeah, he can't offer me much more than that," she thought to herself, but she was sure that after a while she would be able to get him to divorce his wife. "That pill," he replied, "is a special pill to keep you from getting pregnant. You shouldn't mix it with alcohol, of course, but we have no other choice. You've already taken it anyway. It's perfectly safe." After Miranda left, he poured himself another glass of cognac and opened the window, immersed in his own thoughts. He thought about Cindy and the fact that, cheating on her. For the first time in their 20 years together, David's mind was replaying all the times when he could have done it, but never allowed himself to do anything unnecessary with young and attractive girls. He felt guilt, shame at the same time. But he couldn't give up on Miranda. From the very first day, as soon as she stepped into his company, he'd realized he couldn't resist her. His relationship with his wife had long been purely formal. He realized that divorce for him would simultaneously be the end of his past life. Most of the company's assets belonged to her house, a few apartments. This was insisted on by his father, who helped David to settle in life. "Without me, he's nothing," said Sebastian 15 years ago. "If you ever leave him, then with you all my help and patronage can count for nothing. I'll be out of this world." He didn't blink an eye. His opinion hasn't changed much since then. As, however, and the attitude to his son-in-law, which has always been cool and extremely unfriendly. "But you have chosen a husband for yourself, Cindy," he had said with displeasure from the first day of their acquaintance. "Nicholas, not nobility and education. Where did you find him?" That's the kind of man Sebastian raised his daughter alone. His wife passed away 3 years after giving birth. The ridiculous accident that took her life has always stood in front of Sebastian's eyes. How the accident happened, he did not see. On that fateful day, he was at work, and Christina drove to another city to visit her mother and sisters. She simply failed to control her car, police said. When Sebastian arrived at the scene of the accident, the road was slippery. "You know how it is. Please accept my sincerest condolences." He couldn't believe that it was his wife who had been the victim. For years, Sebastian couldn't place himself. It was only after 10 years that he realized that the unbearable heartache he had been living with all this time was beginning to subside. He never married. No woman in the world could replace Christina. He gave all his love and care to his only daughter, who will never remember what her mother looked like in real life. Childhood memories are fading fast. Over the years, he'd been able to accomplish a lot in life. His job had saved him, and his daughter Cindy was the only thread that kept him afloat. He wanted her to be happy, and he didn't need anything else. When his daughter had brought David into the house, Sebastian had been skeptical of the then very young man. "But what kind of fruit is this?" he asked sternly when David left. "Do you seriously want to marry him?" "Really, daughter?" "Well, he's a beggar. He's not from our circle. What are you going to do with him for the rest of your life? Eat pasta and look out the window of a crack house." But Cindy was adamant. She thought meeting David was fateful, and that he was the man with whom she would be truly happy. Sebastian had no choice but to accept it. He couldn't go against his daughter. "I've already told you, I'm not a fan of street dating." "All right, if you're so sure he's your destiny, then get married." "I don't mind, but you'll be living in my house, at least for the first time in your career. I'll help him. You'll start a business if you want. Whatever you want, that's how you'll live. You can. Count on me for everything," Sebastian said his last word and hugged his daughter tightly. Cindy was happy. She loved David, and in her eyes, he was the perfect man. She found out his faults much later, but she never dared to tell her father about them. 2 years after the wedding, Sebastian called David for a serious conversation. "It is time to decide what you are going to do," he said thoughtfully, twirling a glass of whiskey in his hands. "It's already 2 years you lived together. It's time to think about heirs. And you've had enough of this. I don't mind helping you out, and I always will. But I would really like you to earn money yourself and be not just my son-in-law, and something to achieve in life." David didn't work anywhere during those 2 years. He liked being a rich relative so much that he did not think about his career, business, or future life. Sebastian covered all their expenses, and David didn't have to think about where to get money to live. He loved it. For a boy who at the age of 7 was left without parents and brought up by a penniless grandmother, such a life was just a fairy tale. He didn't want anything else. But Sebastian categorically did not like the way of life of his son-in-law. He considered him too wealthy and seriously feared for his daughter's future. "And what will you do if I am suddenly gone?" he asked. "Like that. You will spend the inheritance and then go on the world." "No, I understand. He's a half-orphan with no family and no tribe. His parents lived like that, his grandmother lived like that, and he'll live his whole life the same way and not even blink an eye. But you're a daughter, you're used to a completely different way of life, and you're going to insist that your fool is on the right path." After that conversation, Cindy began to insist that David get smart. Father has a point, she reasoned, sitting beside her husband at the window with a cup of tea late at night. We can't spend our whole lives with you. That's how you have to grow up. Let's start a construction business. I studied architecture and I know a thing or two about it. We have a small town, but look how many solid people come here and build luxurious cottages near the city limits. This niche is a gold mine. As far as I know, they bring all the contractors here from Moscow. They order estimates and work there too. Because there is no company in our city that could do this kind of work with quality. No one has bothered to do it. Why don't we try? Sebastian liked the idea and David had no choice but to agree. He didn't know much about business and even less about architecture. No offense, son-in-law, but I'm putting my money into this and I want to make sure it doesn't run out, so to speak. We men are a fickle people. Wherever the current takes them, that's where they go. He laughed and grinned. And Cindy did not like to hear her father say that. She had never doubted her husband. She was very much hurt. What Sebastian thought of him was bad. "Daughter, why are you so tense?" he asked. "I was joking. Son-in-law will give 10%. Do not worry and make him your deputy. Let him work, and you will sit at home and enjoy life. Do your own thing. Raise your children. That's how it should be in a normal family." After 10 years, the company became the only and exclusive one in its niche. The money came into the accounts in such quantities and with such regularity that at the end of the next reporting period, David said, "But, by and large, Sebastian, you and I can already go to a well-deserved retirement. No more work. This money will be enough for the rest of our lives." "No, it won't work that way," my father-in-law replied. "If business is booming, we have to work. Expand to several more regions. We need to buy a prestigious office, not rent this junk, in which we have been sitting since the day we were founded." David had no choice but to listen to his father-in-law. Sebastian never ceased to be the unquestioned authority in the family, to whom everyone around him had to obey. Even Cindy was very upset when she could not fulfill his wishes. "Daughter, when are you giving me a grandchild? And to my beloved son, husband constantly asked him, not making me suspect you, that for 10 years between you something was only once. And that was drunk and on the first wedding night. Or nothing at all. He sleeps on the floor on a mattress because you won't let him near the bed. Maybe there's something wrong with you and you're hiding something from me." Sebastian burst out laughing, and Cindy lowered her eyes and almost cried. Her father didn't realize how much this illness meant to her. Robert. She had tried unsuccessfully to get pregnant all these years, but increasingly came to the conclusion that she would never be able to have children. "Have you seen a doctor? Have you even been to a doctor in all this time? Have you had any tests?" Sebastian asked. He sincerely did not understand how Cindy had never been able to get pregnant for so many years. She had always been in good health. She had never had any problems. Even in her early teenage years, she was so rarely sick that her teachers marveled at it. "No, Daddy, I never went anywhere," she answered. "I didn't have any problems, and I didn't feel the need to go to the doctor." "What do you mean, there were no problems? And the fact that you've been living together for 10 years, and you still don't have children, you don't consider it a problem?" "Cindy's not hiding me. Please. It's okay, I'm your father. I've always wished you nothing but the best. You're behaving now not just like a little child, but like an uneducated woman from a distant village. But where is it seen that a modern young woman with a higher education and 10 years of not going to the doctor? Or maybe you just don't want children. That's why you don't care about your health, because you don't care if you have children or not. I want to, of course I do, but it's not working out. Maybe we're fine. Or maybe David's the problem. Have you talked to him about it?" "No, that's out of the question. But what kind of problem could David have? Think about it." "Okay, I'll go to the doctor. Maybe there really is something I'm not even aware of." The test results showed a pathology, but the doctor was quick to reassure Cindy. "It's nothing to worry about," she said. "It's nothing. More than 50% of women face such problems. You will come for treatment in a year. You will be able to start planning, give birth to a healthy baby, and everything will be fine." And she didn't fool her. A year later, Cindy really told her husband and father the happy news. Sebastian was over the moon. "If a son is born, I'll sign over to him at once. Half of all our capital, and part of the company as well, will belong to him immediately after the birth," he joyfully planned. "And if a daughter is born, then she, as well as the son, sign a part of the business. And I will also build for her a large house right on the shore of the lake so that she will live there in the future with her family. And remember my grandfather with a kind word, David. Why aren't you saying anything? You don't seem happy. You're having a baby, Dad. You should be celebrating, and you're sitting there like you're drowning in water. At that moment, David couldn't quite decide how he felt. On the one hand, he was glad, because if he and the head never had children, she would continue to throw regular tantrums about it. On the other hand, David realized that there was no way he could stay on the sidelines. He had to prove himself as a loving, caring father, and he didn't like children. He was annoyed by children's crying and laughter and was not attracted to night and early rising, but to admit it was tantamount to suicide. His father-in-law and wife would not give him a quiet life if he even hinted that he had never aspired to be a father, and was overjoyed that it had taken Cindy so long to get pregnant. Accidents don't happen by chance. And after only 2 months, David stopped tormenting himself with thoughts of how much their lives would soon change when a child came into the family. Another fateful accident that was the biggest blow to Sebastian after losing his wife. Cindy had gone shopping that day. The term was small, so she categorically refused an assistant, the escort that her father had strongly suggested to her. As soon as he found out she was expecting a baby. "Dad, what's the matter? Am I small or what?" Cindy smiled indignantly. "I feel fine. Everything is fine. I don't carry heavy things. I don't go anywhere out of the house. I'm doing just fine on my own." "Well, do you know?" Sebastian answered thoughtfully. "Watch your step. You can get dizzy at any moment. You'll be dizzy before you know it. Dad, don't worry, please, when the term is big. Then I'll be sure to get some help. I promise. And as long as I'm strong enough, I'll be fine." The escalator at the mall broke down unexpectedly. But I can't just sit downstairs in the cafeteria and wait for them to fix it. You could waste the whole day here. I still have a stroller to pick out. Cindy thought to herself and walked upstairs. She wanted to go to the baby stores on the 3rd floor and buy things. Nice little things in threads, bonnets, discharge envelopes. She didn't know yet whether she was expecting a boy or a girl. But since she didn't plan to stop on one child, she wasn't afraid to buy something extra or not. The next baby will definitely come in handy. She didn't even feel dizzy and lost her balance. Cindy woke up in the hospital and was horrified when she heard the distant voice of the doctor talking to her father outside her room. Good thing she hadn't broken herself yet. Kathy, the same doctor who had treated Cindy for Sebastian, had said, "You know what escalators are like. You could break your head. It happens early in the pregnancy. It only seems that while the belly is not, you can continue to live a normal life. It's really not. Most of these situations happen early in the pregnancy. You need to calm your daughter down. It's not a big deal." When he entered the room, Cindy turned her back to the wall. "Thank you for coming. But I don't want to see anyone," she said. "Sorry, Dad." She didn't even ask where David was or why he hadn't come. That was the least of her interest at that moment. The only question she wanted to ask the doctor was if she could get pregnant again, or if after everything that had happened it was impossible. Hearing the disappointing answer, Cindy went into a deep depression. "I didn't say no." Kathy tried to explain to her. "I said there was nothing wrong with what had happened. It happens to women. And you're not the first, and you won't be the last. But you need to get tested and go to rehab." Where in my words did you hear that? No, I don't understand. But it was useless to explain anything to Cindy. She had her own way of understanding and had changed a lot since then. She blamed everyone around her for climbing the damn ladder without thinking about the consequences. Her father for worrying too much about her and the future child and thus attracting trouble. David for indifference and carelessness. He could have already gone shopping with her, as a future father, to pick up things for the baby, but he didn't do it. Not because he was so busy at work, but because he didn't want to. "If you think it's going to be the same, you're wrong," said Cindy David 6 months after it all happened. "No, I'm not going to divorce you, and I'm not going to get into a fight with you either. I just realized what kind of person you are. You're indifferent, cynical, and cruel. I wonder if you didn't marry us out of convenience. Yeah, you never wanted a family, you never wanted kids. Just answer me this question. I think I deserve honesty on your part. David didn't know how to calm his wife and what to do to make their relationship work. "Don't take it to heart," Sebastian urged him. "She's in a state now where it's all my fault and yours, and she blames herself. It'll take time and things will get better. She'll get pregnant again. You will have a healthy baby, and she will forget all this nightmare as a terrible dream." But as the years passed, things with his wife never got back to normal. Only 2 years later, Cindy began to feel a little warmer towards her husband. Then David seen that their relationship had improved, but another attempt to get pregnant again ruined everything. "I don't understand," she resented. "No, I really don't understand. Have we progressed to such an extent that invented a special pill for men, the existence of which neither I nor the rest of the world do not know? And you're taking them secretly from me?" She really couldn't understand what was going on, and it made her very angry. All these years, she regularly visited the doctor, and according to Kathy, the body fully recovered after a year, but the pregnancy never came. So they lived another 8 years. During this time, scandals and squabbles became the norm. David was no longer even surprised when, coming home from work once again, he heard the angry voice of his wife, who howled at him a whole stream of complaints and reproaches. Sebastian had not interfered in their conflicts for a long time. For him, business always came first, and as long as David coped with the tasks set before him, the rest was no longer so important. That day he didn't get home until the morning. Drunk David could barely stand on his feet and was picking with the key in the door, trying unsuccessfully to open the lock, vaguely aware of what was happening around him. He barely made it to the small bedroom, a room that no one had opened for years, and after struggling through another door, he fell asleep on the floor in his clothes. "Olia, maybe you can finally explain to me what's going on. Where are all these expensive things coming from?" Kelly had been trying to talk to her daughter for months now, but every time she started the conversation, Miranda either changed the subject or avoided answering, saying she was late for something. And Kelly couldn't find a place to go. She was so worried about her daughter that she talked to Lisa about the worst thoughts that were going through her head. "No, Kelly, really?" Lisa wrung her hands when she suggested that her daughter was sleeping with men for money. And when would she do that? She's at work from morning till night and at weekends or at home. He's either out and about, but that's not it. "I don't think so. I'm sure it's not. It's something else." Kelly was running through all the possibilities in her head. For months now, Miranda had been regularly buying new and rather expensive clothes, appliances and jewelry that she obviously couldn't afford on a single salary. Miranda's income was at best enough for food, and even more so, it was not the first month that she gave all the money she earned to her family. "You have a rich admirer?" Kelly kept up. "You tell me, don't be shy. Your grandmother and I are very worried about you. Maybe you've gotten involved with some bad man." That day, Miranda felt really bad. Since morning, she had been suffering from headaches and nausea, but she didn't pay much attention to it. As usual, first thing in the morning, she went out to the family breakfast where Lisa and Kelly stared at her intently with 4 eyes. "Miranda, after all, have a conscience," Lisa's grandmother said sternly. "My mother and I are going out of our way, and you're opening up to us." That morning she was making fish pancakes, and for lunch she planned to make herring under a fur coat. It was a very ordinary day, not a holiday. But Lisa wanted something unusual, so she had bought fish and herring the day before, which were waiting in the refrigerator. However, she said, holding out the fish to Miranda, "Now I'm going to cut it up and you'll help me. You're off today anyway. You can spend time with your family." Looking at the giblets, Miranda felt sick to her stomach. After a few seconds, she covered her mouth with her hand and ran to the bathroom. "Not good," Lisa said, lowering her eyes. "Ugh, girl, it's bad. What's with the salts?" A flustered Kelly ran into the kitchen, having retreated to the bathroom a few minutes ago to wash her hands. She ran into the bathroom and kicked me out, all pale and pregnant by the looks of it. "Well, she's coming out now, so we'll ask her." Miranda, who returned from the bathroom a few minutes later, quietly said that she would not have breakfast and, pouring a glass of water, went into her room. Grandmother and mother looked at each other, understanding each other without words. Grandmother set off after her. Kelly tried her best to hide her rage, but she never succeeded in doing so. So for the next few days she didn't speak to her daughter. That's right. You have to get away from her before you can talk to her about anything. Lisa supported her daughter. You're making her feel bad, and she's already in a bad place. At that moment, she already knew who had made her granddaughter so happy, and she had a definite opinion about it. It's up to you, of course. But I would in your place very well think with this man you have no future and cannot be. Raising a child alone is very hard, and your mother and I are no good. We don't even have much money saved up. How are you going to live while you're on maternity leave? You'll lose your seniority, you won't be able to work. And then, oh, you're a fool. She hugged the crying Miranda and stroked her head, and then continued the interrogation. Does he know? Have you told him? I don't know how to tell him, Grandma, Miranda replied. She's sobbing. You know, here's the thing. We were in storage. He took me to a doctor he knew. I had tests, pills prescribed. This isn't Robert from the neighborhood. David's a grown man. He takes responsibility for everything. I don't know how this could have happened. She really didn't know. But Lisa, who knew a thing or two about medicine, figured it out right away. 2 weeks ago, Miranda had a serious poisoning. She and Kelly had been scared out of their minds. She was so sick she couldn't eat anything all day. Lisa blamed it on that, so she didn't hesitate to ask Miranda when she had last been close to David. And when she got an answer, she said, "Didn't your doctor tell you that if you get sick or poisoned, the pills can stop working? They just cleaned out of your system in time for the poisoning. That's why you got pregnant. You didn't know about this." "Of course not," replied Miranda. "And even if I had, what would I have told him? It was over the weekend. But I went to work on Monday, and I felt fine. I just had a little headache." "Oh, you're up till 3? "It doesn't depend on the day of the week," said Lisa. "They could be 3 or 4 days off under these circumstances." "Well, you talk to David. I think we should tell him about the baby. Even if he refuses or denies it, he's not a poor man, so we'll sue him. And let him support you and the baby." But Miranda hadn't wanted to have a baby out of wedlock for months. She had been pedantically pushing David to seriously consider divorcing his wife and get all the necessary paperwork done. "I don't understand you," she said. "If, as you say, nothing connects in your dreams and you haven't even slept together in over a year, what's the point of your marriage? Divorce. Divide the assets and live in peace. If you don't need her and she doesn't need you either. You know, I'm not going to be a mistress either. I don't know how much I love you and I want you to belong to me. I don't want to share you with anyone." But David not only hid his relationship with Miranda in every possible way, but also lived in constant fear of his wife finding out about it. Divorce was not in his plans, and despite the fact that he gave Miranda hope, he was not going to seriously consider it. It was too risky and unprofitable. In the event of a divorce, he would be left absolutely destitute. The house and all the real estate belonged to his wife, and he would get a 10% stake in the construction company. This was not only very little, but also completely unreliable. Sebastian would surely find a way to get David out of the business. He had made that clear to him. When their relationship with the head first began to have problems, "Whatever is going on between you," Sebastian said, "you are her husband and she is your wife, and you dare not cheat on her. As long as you live in my house and you're involved in my business." I hope you heard me, because I'm not in the habit of repeating myself twice. David understood. He didn't even need to explain what these words meant. "Dear Vitiak, if you dare to go to the left, cheat on my visual daughter, or divorce her, I will leave you without pants and let you go around the world." Translated into simple language from the mouth of my father-in-law, it would sound like that. But he always tried to appear better than he was, and never forgot to be polite. As soon as Miranda arrived at work, instead of walking to her seat, she went straight to his office and asked if they would meet today. David sensed something wrong. "We weren't supposed to go out tonight," he replied. "It was the day after tomorrow, and I booked the room for the day after tomorrow. Something's wrong." All these months he'd been dragging her around to different hotels, some of which he'd arrived at much later than she had. And when the receptionist changed, paid for his presence in the room unofficially and glad-handed there, as if he were a thief. When Miranda asked why he still wouldn't rent an apartment where they could date and where she could move away from her mother and grandmother, David said it might draw unnecessary attention. "This is such a stupid joke," she asked. who needs you and me. Not a private investigator hired by your wife who chases you around and records your every move. You're a freak, honestly. This whole encryption thing is ridiculous and ridiculous. If she needs to know, she'll find out. She can gossip at work too. People talk about us from time to time. And no matter how much we hide our relationship, a few particularly voracious people would have figured it out long ago. But David ignored Miranda's comments about the apartment. Riding in a hotel was for him much more comfortable. Even though the city was small, there were plenty of hotels, especially in the center. They didn't cost as much as a private apartment or a rented house. Miranda would hardly want to settle for a one-bedroom in a 5-story building. She would want a nice apartment in some new central building, and that kind of expense wasn't part of David's plans. She was just his mistress. A good one, the first and maybe even the only one in his life, but a mistress. "Okay," he said, "I heard you. All right, I'll meet you tonight. Wait for me around the corner." The usual. "I'll leave the office half an hour later than you and pick you up at our place." Since the beginning of their relationship, they had chosen this place, where the two alleyways were so close together that only one person could pass between them at a time. There was no possibility to park a car nearby, and only a few people knew that there was always an empty space in the courtyard of a modest old apartment building. Miranda didn't understand this ridiculous encryption either, but there was no point in arguing with David. If he wanted to play with all this, he could play with it like in kindergarten. "I'm not sorry," she thought to herself. She was quite satisfied with the situation she was in. Of course, in the future she would like to put a legal stamp in her passport, but not so much for the sake of the marriage itself, but for the sake of the property on which she was so counting. She had no idea how things stood in David's family. In fact, her passion for him had passed almost immediately. If the first 2 or 3 months after their acquaintance she was really crazy about him and was ready to dissolve in him, then after a very short period of time in the girl's head was already building a quite understandable calculation. Miranda's plans were not to stay on the sidelines for several years, but she didn't want to marry just anyone. David was the perfect candidate for a husband. Mature, serious, solid, rich. The kind of man every girl dreams of. And Miranda was more than sure that by becoming David's wife, she would become at the same time the owner of the company where she worked. And she didn't even realize how wrong she was upon hearing that Miranda was pregnant. David was furious. As he screamed, "How is this possible? Can you please explain to me how you couldn't take your pills by the hour? The doctor explained everything to you. You told me you were taking them clearly. Everything was fine until now. What happened all of a sudden?" When he heard about the poisoning, he got even angrier. "Why didn't you tell me anything?" he asked. "Don't you have a tongue? We would have refrained temporarily. Would you have gone to the doctor again and she would have told you what to do next?" "Miranda, how can you be so wealthy? Explain it to me, please." She was really hurt by David's reaction. She knew he didn't want children, at least not at the moment, but deep down Miranda hoped that he would be pleased. But he wasn't. "I see the only way out of this situation," he said when he calmed down. "You go to the doctor tomorrow and we settle this matter right there." "No," she replied stiffly. "I will not do that under any circumstances. I'll keep the baby and you decide. Either you get a divorce and we raise him together, live like a normal family. That's a nice bonus for you too. After all, you're marrying a very attractive girl who's half your age. That's something these days. You got to pay for it. Either you and I split up and you pay me alimony through the courts. It's your choice. I'll expect to hear from you in a week." After these words, she got out of the car and, slamming the door loudly, went to the bus stop to wait for a cab in a crowded place. David drove out of the yard and headed towards home. He had never been so angry in his life. He didn't know what to do next. For the first time in years, he could lose absolutely everything he was so used to. The thought terrified him. He hoped that he would definitely think of something. But there had to be some way out, he thought to himself, shaking with rage. He didn't notice how he got home. He went into his little room, which had become his regular place to sleep for the last few months, and fell asleep. Nothing but trouble awaited him in the near future, and he wanted to take his mind off the depressing reality around him. And the only way he could do that was in his sleep. "Hey, I've made up my mind. I'd like you and I to meet today and discuss all the details." Miranda heard David's voice in the phone receiver. He didn't need a week to weigh everything up. David needed a few hours to make a final decision. He decided to get rid of the problem of Miranda and her future child, which could ruin his whole life. He came up with a plan quickly and had already called a doctor he knew, who was ready to help him. The only thing left to do was to meet Miranda and stir her pills into her tea or juice. "Are you sure that will be enough?" He checked with the doctor he knew. "If anything goes wrong, everything will be fine," he replied. "You don't have to worry about her life being in danger. These drugs are routinely used to terminate pregnancies, so there's no catch. The only thing is that the dosage here is much higher than we usually give to our patients. But that's okay. Did you explain the situation to me to help you?" "I'm sure I did. It's a compulsory measure, and remember that we don't know each other, and I didn't give you anything." Of course, as agreed, complete confidentiality. That day, he barely made it to the doctor's appointment, which was extremely important to him. When he left the house, David didn't find his car near the gate and cursed to himself he went to the garage. But there was no car there either. He thought it was strange. Sebastian usually worked at home in his office, and if he traveled anywhere, it wasn't this early. Cindy's absence from the house made David uneasy too. What the hell? He thought to himself and started dialing his wife's number. "Hello, where are you?" he asked her when she answered the phone. "I don't understand anything at all." "What the hell is this?" "I woke up, I was going to work, I went out to the yard, my car was gone. Sebastian's gone too. What the hell is going on?" "Oh look, David, where's Dad?" "I have no idea," Cindy said. "When I left the house today, I was surprised he wasn't here. It must have been an emergency. So he left at the crack of dawn." "Well, you know how it is sometimes. I took your car. I tried to start mine this morning. It wouldn't start. But I called our service. They came this morning, towed it away. I hope they fix it. I don't know what happened to it. I'm sorry, I just saw you sleeping. You're usually up a lot earlier for work. I figured you weren't going out today. You're the boss, you can afford it." "Okay, I heard you," he said with a sigh. "What time are you coming?" "I don't know. I'm at a friend's house. She asked me to help with the funeral. Her father died. Dad's a good friend of Dad's, but Dad doesn't know yet. He wasn't home when I left. Don't tell him anything. I'll tell him myself. Okay, bye." He hung up the phone and called a cab right away. The doctor's appointment was less than an hour away, and he had to get there. And in the morning, terrible traffic jams, which always annoyed David. That's life in a city of only 1 million people and a half in two. And this is still at best. And the traffic jams are like in Moscow. That's what he thought to himself every day when he got to work, sipping fresh coffee in the next traffic jam. This morning he was especially angry. Not only had he overslept, but he was late for a meeting. His car had been taken by Cindy, and now he'd be forced to drive whatever he could get his hands on all day. Most of the local cabs were of the same type, and very often passengers did not have the opportunity to choose which car they would take. David found this particularly annoying, as he was used to comfort. Such trips usually caused him nothing but stress. "I thought you weren't coming," said a tall, dark-haired man in dark jeans and a turtleneck. "Here you go." He handed David a bag containing several large pills. "Put them in your pocket, and you can look at them later." In return, David handed him an envelope, which the stranger opened at once, to make sure of the honesty of the buyer. "Can I not count it?" he asked. "You don't have to count it," David replied. "There's no reason for me to cheat you. I just have a question. These pills are huge, are they? Dissolve in tea or juice. Are you sure about that?" "But you're like a little man," grinned the doctor, who never gave his name. "Put it in your tea or wherever you need to strain it. It's a jostle. A little bit, and it'll dissolve." "Don't worry, if you mean if she can spot the pills, she can't, and she can't taste them either. I'm good to go." David nodded and called Miranda once more to confirm the meeting. "Listen, here's the story," he said. "Cindy left in my car this morning and didn't even tell me that her car had broken down. Let's meet you somewhere, for example, and I'll pick you up near the office or somewhere near your house." In general, we'll discount the address by text, and not to ride in these stupid cabs. We'll rent a car, and then we'll go to a hotel. Or we can even sit in a restaurant and talk about everything calmly." Miranda agreed. She refused to understand what was going on. Yesterday he was ready to turn the heat on her. And today he was so friendly. She even thought for a second that the creepy conversation hadn't happened. When David had offered to get rid of the baby, she had even had hope that he would propose marriage, and they would all live together, one family. Very rich and wealthy, with a family. Within an hour, they were already driving in a rented car. David was so courteous that Miranda was becoming more and more pleased with his behavior. He suggested a ride around town, and she accepted. There was no sign of trouble. As they approached the bridge that connected the two sides of the city, David and Miranda had to stop. "What kind of day are you having today?" David exclaimed. The bridge was blocked. Several police patrols and ambulances were standing near it. "What happened here?" Getting out of the car, David joined the eyewitnesses and started asking people about the incident. His instinct, curiosity, kicked in. It was a long way around the bridge, and it didn't make any sense. There was more than enough time to get Miranda drunk on pills, and such events don't happen every day. So David decided that since they had come here, it would be foolish not to find out what had happened. When he got a little closer, he saw a familiar car and tried to break through the fence. At that moment, his heart froze and almost jumped out of his chest. "Let me through," shouted David, trying to push with his elbows the crowd of gawkers and journalists, who closed with their bodies all possible approaches to the bridge. "I beg you, let me through there. It's my wife." To calm David down, a policeman approached him and, looking at him carefully, asked him to show me your documents, please. "Man, are you so violent? It's a public place." "There's been an accident. It's being investigated. If it's your wife, I'm sorry for your loss. We haven't identified her yet. The car caught fire, the body was thrown aside. Forensics are working on the scene. As soon as the documents are found, we'll let you know." Having familiarized himself with David's passport, the policeman returned the document to him, and he stepped over the fence and said something in his colleague's ear. A moment later, David saw the woman's sheet-covered body being placed on a gurney and pushed into one of the ambulances. From a distance, the woman's face could not be seen. A few meters away from the scene, where there was no longer the loud rumble of the car, people could clearly be heard talking. David dialed Cindy. "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable. Call back later." He heard short beeps on the other end of the wire and, bursting out to himself, tried several more times to call Sebastian. But his phone was also unavailable. Shoved into the car, uncomprehending Miranda, who all this time that he was thrashing around near the bridge, stood aside and watched what was happening. He got behind the wheel and they drove off. "Where are we going?" she asked excitedly. "David, please explain what happened." "Miranda, let's do this later." He drove very fast, trying not to stop even at traffic lights. There were several large hospitals in the city. David couldn't even guess which one Cindy would be taken to. The policeman had said she was dead. It went through his head. When he stopped at the intersection, David immediately went online to look up the addresses of the hospitals that had morgues. There were only 2 of them, and as soon as the green light on the traffic light turned on, he rushed with furious speed to the first navigator, built the shortest route, and in 20 minutes David parked his car in the backyard. "Sit here," he said to Miranda. "I'll be right back." When he got out of the car, he ran to the waiting room and, knocking people off their feet, jumped up to the reception window. "My wife had just had an accident on the bridge," he gasped, trying to explain. "I happened to be driving by, but they wouldn't let me near the accident scene." The policeman said she was dead. "Where is she now?" The uncomprehending woman at the front desk tried to calm him down and, after asking for her wife's initials, asked him to wait. "Man, listen, even if she has already been brought in, she has not been registered yet," said the woman at the reception desk, not taking her eyes off the telephone receiver. "You will have to wait at least half an hour for the information about new arrivals." That half hour was the longest of David's life. Sitting on the visitor's bench, he tried to sort out his feelings. When the woman at the front desk called out to him, David's heart shook again. "Our pathologist will be right with you," she said. "Go with him for identification, because no identification was found on the woman you're talking about." There's another male victim there that she collided with on the bridge. He was taken to intensive care. Walking down a scary dark corridor in a small room that was located near the hospital grounds, David could not believe that all of this was happening to him. When he entered the morgue, he almost fainted. It was really her. Cindy's face was still a shade of blue, her eyes were closed and her hair was blind. As he came closer, he looked at her closely and said yes, it was her. At that moment, he felt that he could hardly stand on his feet, and the pathologist, taking him under his arm, immediately led David out into the corridor. "You will be informed when the body can be taken away," said the man in a tired voice. "There has been a serious accident. There will be an autopsy and investigation. You will also be called to the police to testify. Do you want me to walk you or can you walk yourself? Did you come alone or will someone meet you? If you're not feeling well, you can stay at the hospital." No, thank you. I'm fine," David answered quietly. "I'll find my own way out. Thank you. Dead is dead. What can you do?" "There's nothing to be done," he added sadly. He left the morgue and walked slowly to the backyard where he had left the car. He felt dizzy. Sometimes David felt as if the ground would fall away from under his feet. As he sat in the car, he silently ran his hands around his head and put it down on the steering wheel. He sat like that for about 15 minutes, after which he told Miranda, "Sorry, we won't be able to talk today. I'll drive you to the office or home now. Wherever you say. Anyway, if you want, I don't care if you take a cab." He didn't even remember the pills. They were still in his bag. A few minutes later, the pathologist returned to the morgue and noticed that Cindy was barely moving her fingers. At first, he thought he was dreaming and hallucinating. But when he took the woman's hand, he found he could barely feel her pulse. The man ran out into the hallway and screamed, "Doctor, urgently." The surgeon who arrived from the neighboring building was shocked. "But on the basis of what did you state death?" he asked. "On the basis of the fact that she was unconscious for several hours lying there?" "I don't know." The paramedic said there was no pulse. "Severe edema," he said. "He said she was dead." What a bunch of experts. I wonder who gave them their diplomas. "She does have severe swelling, traumatic shock, and allergies. Quick scalpel me, and something like a pen base so I can make an incision so she can start breathing. We may not make it to the OR. Okay, it's been so long. And put rubbing alcohol on my hands." Clueless, he swore again, and after making an incision, inserted the base of a simple ballpoint pen into Cindy's throat, and then she breathed. "William, are you a specialist from God?" "Golden hands," the pathologist said proudly. "Never saved a life in my practice. Just like that, practically on your knees. Even in the field, can you do that? You're still here with the surgeon. Run a gurney to the next building. Tell them to get the OR ready." The man ran out of the morgue, and William squatted beside Cindy, who had already managed to open her eyes and was looking at him with a frightened, glassy stare. She didn't understand what was going on around her and couldn't say a word. But William understood everything from her eyes. "Breathe, sweetheart, breathe," he said. "Will you live? That's the most important thing. After a while, Daddy, I still don't know why you did it." Cindy asked Sebastian for the umpteenth time, "How did you do it? You could have gone to jail. Why would you risk it? You could have had a normal, human conversation and figured it out." At the hospital, she realized he'd done something to the car. When Cindy woke up and the investigator told her that the brakes had been cut, she knew immediately that something was wrong. She vividly remembered that morning and how the night before she had received a call from Vasilisa, who had asked her to come and help her organize her father's funeral. Everything was a blur, but Cindy clearly realized that she was not the one who was supposed to be in that car, which meant she wasn't supposed to be in that terrible accident either. "That's right, David," she thought, and everything just clicked into place. "Do you know who might have wanted you dead?" the investigator asked. "Perhaps you had serious enemies or ill-wishers?" "No," she answered calmly. "I don't know who it could have been. There are no people capable of such a wild, desperate act in my circle." Sebastian showed up only a few days later, sitting beside Cindy in her hospital bed. He held her hand and apologized. She was scared to imagine how he felt. The man who had almost killed his only daughter. After she was discharged, Cindy hesitated for a long time to ask her father the question that plagued her. She could not find a convenient time to talk to him. Then her father was evasive and unwilling to explain. Then there were so many things to do that it was too much to do. That period was one of the most difficult in Cindy's life. Everything fell on her at once: her father's deed, which she could not explain, and the divorce from David, and his betrayal. Before all this, she could not even think that he cheated on her. And he's doing it in front of everyone. "I couldn't let that scoundrel have a fraction of the fortune you've made at the expense of me and my resources," father replied. "I could never accept that he had that kind of money in his hands. He never earned a penny of his life. Everything he had was earned through opinion. If he hadn't married you, he'd be as naked as a falcon. Why I let that marriage happen, I still don't understand." After the divorce, David took some of his assets that were legally his, but the rest of his assets remained in Cindy's possession, no jointly acquired. Sebastian said sternly, "It was all bought and given to her by me. You can take your paltry interest, which we'll easily fulfill in the next 6 months, and get the hell out of here before my eyes." That's what David did. As soon as the divorce proceedings were finalized, he packed his bags and left for an unknown destination. What to say to that Miranda girl? Cindy asked as she said goodbye to him. She didn't hold any grudge against him, as she had already at that point recovered from the accident. Discharged from the hospital, she knew that she had met the man she truly loved. David. But don't keep quiet, please. Everyone knows everything already. It's silly to try to avoid talking to me about it. What shall we tell her?" "I don't know," he answered thoughtfully. "Say something like I've gone far away and I'm never coming back. Let her think what she wants. I don't owe her anything. Goodbye. And yes, don't hold a grudge. As far as I can see, your life is going quite well. So whatever you do, it's all for the best." After these words, he went to check in, and Cindy left the airport and drove home. Sebastian's guilt in the accident was never proven. He wasn't even in the circle of suspects. No evidence that would directly point to exactly who committed the crime was ever found. No one would think that such a respected man could kill his own daughter, and he didn't want to. It just happened. 6 months later, the case was closed for lack of evidence. Cindy tried not to think about the nightmare she had been through, of all the terrible events in the epicenter of which she found herself unwillingly. The only thing that remained in her memory was the moment when she met William. During the time that Cindy was in rehab, she became very attached to him, and he, realizing that she reciprocated his affections. The day she was discharged from the hospital, he proposed to her. "What's the big deal?" he said when he saw her surprised face. "I'm just turning 46 this year. It's time to get married. What's the point of wasting time?" Sebastian was much happier with his daughter's new husband than with the previous one. "Well done, Cindy," he said, when his daughter shared the happy news with him. Smartest over the years, it shows. Almost immediately after Cindy recovered, she told her father to contact Miranda's family and talk to her. "Dad, we shouldn't leave her in this situation," she said. "I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel it's my duty to help her." Sebastian agreed with his daughter, but Miranda herself was very surprised by their visit. "Don't worry," he said. "We will definitely help you and your granddaughter. You will not need anything." "What granddaughter?" "What are you talking about?" she asked. "You're not your son, and my Noah's not my grandson. Why would you do that? We're complete strangers to you." But Cindy wasn't going to back down. She insisted on talking and, apologizing for her ex-husband's behavior, promised that she would definitely support Miranda and the baby. "As you can see for yourself, my options are not limited, at least in this city. I believe that when the child grows up, you should go to school and definitely realize in life," said Cindy. She herself was getting to grips with the intricacies and details of the construction business, which she had run single-handedly after her divorce from David. At first, Sebastian tried to help his daughter, but when she got used to the role of a manager, she categorically forbade her father to interfere in the company's affairs. "Dad, but no matter what. And I still have an education," she said. "And in general, let's see what I can do without your help. Or you'll say that I can't do anything without you." And since then, Sebastian has not passed to her. Sometime after the birth of Noah, Robert proposed to Miranda. He had asked her several times before then to get married so that Noah would be born into a complete family. but she had flatly refused. Miranda felt so guilty to all of them, to Robert, who had been unfairly rejected at one time, to her mother and grandmother, and even to Cindy. It took her a long time to come to her senses after everything that had happened. "Daughter, forget about this ridiculous crush on that freak," Kelly said. When Miranda once again blamed herself for everything that had happened, she said, "Who cares? What are your years?" She was ashamed to admit that. She had met David not only for profit, but also because she was really in love with him. The mere thought of it made her feel sick to her stomach. How could I? What did I see in him? She asked herself, but found no answer. When Noah grew up, Miranda graduated from art school and began painting on commission. She no longer dreamed of becoming an actress, and she realized her desire for popularity through her own blog on the internet, where she exhibited not only photos of her works of art, but also moments from their common life with Robert and Noah, which caused people's delight and adoration. "But you see," said her mother, "dreams come true." "Yes," Miranda replied. "If you dream right, of course, and not dreaming at all is harmful." My grandmother jokingly supported the conversation. "That's right." Simultaneously, all three thought to themselves and set off to gather a waking Noah for a walk.